Hello and welcome to another episode of the Joshlin Smith Trial Wrap. I am Nasiphi Same. For more than 2 months, the court became the center of national attention. Each day was filled with emotional testimony, shocking revelations, and heartbreaking accounts. This week, that chapter came to a close, while at least in the eyes of the law, Kelly Smith, her boyfriend Jacqueline Apollos, and their friend Stefano van Rijn were all found guilty of kidnapping and trafficking 6-year-old Joshlin Smith, Kelly's daughter. But while the Western Cape High Court has delivered its verdict, justice for many feels incomplete. Joshlin is still missing 15 months later, as her family and South Africans are left with more questions than answers. For more than 8 weeks, the trial has gripped the nation, marked by dramatic twists, explosive testimonies, relief, and heartbreak. At the end, justice was served, but closure remains out of reach. The Western Cape High Court has handed down what has been described as a landmark ruling in the kidnapping and trafficking case of then 6-year-old Joshlin Smith. Yet, 15 months later, Joshlin is still missing, and the pain in the Saldanha community remains fresh and raw. Days of relentless testimonies, 32 documentary exhibits admitted, 35 witnesses called, an inspection in loco, a failed Section 174 application in a bid for Stefano van Rijn and Kelly Smith to be discharged of human trafficking and kidnapping charges. Judge Nathan Erasmus's decision, delivered with clarity and finality, and leaving no doubt in his findings, pointing to damning evidence and the behavior of the accused following Joshlin's disappearance.
Of the view that the state succeeded in proving the guilt of Mr. Apollos, Mr. van Rijn, and Smith on the main count in count 1 and on count 2, so following order is issued. You may remain seated. On count 1, you are guilty of a contravention of Section 4.1 of the Act, read with the other legislation on trafficking in persons in relation to Joshlin Smith. On count 2, you are also convicted of kidnapping. On the main count, I have already found that on the evidence before me, Joshlin was exchanged. The fact is that her freedom of movement and liberty was inhibited. Now that in itself are the main elements of the act of kidnapping. How Ms. Smith behaved herself after Joshlin's disappearance. Whilst we're there, let's deal with her conduct. She's inconsistent as to why Joshlin didn't go to school that day. The timeline doesn't make sense. And the conduct of particularly Mr. Apollos and Ms. Smith is not that of a concerned parent. And why not? To my mind, the only inference is because you knew. And that supports in itself Miss Lombard and coming from Mr. Policies.
For Joshlin's family, the verdict brings little comfort. The child remains missing and questions linger about the full truth.
I am angry because nobody knows if she's still alive, if Joshlin is still alive. As a grandmother, I believe she knows where the child is.
I'm feeling happy for the outcomes, but still missing Joshlin. Joshlin is still missing. It feels not nice to didn't know where is she, what she eat, what she drink, or where she sleep, and how that the people here ever treat her.
The court previously ruled that statements made by Apollos and Van Ryn at Sea Border Unit officers in March last year, before they were officially arrested, allegedly under torture and coercion at the hands of police, were legally admissible.
The statements of Mr. Apollos and Mr. Van Ryn were not admissible against Ms. Smith, but they were admissible against themselves. There's evidence on record that even corroborates the state's evidence that implicates Ms. Smith. You can only strengthen the state's case on that evidence. And that was the reason why I refused it, because there was evidence before the court on which a reasonable court could convict.
The Western Cape's Director of Public Prosecution hailed the ruling as historic, setting legal precedent in the fight against human trafficking.
Today's conviction, it's a first, it's a landmark decision. The legislation, as you've heard the judge said, there's never been a pronouncement or a case on it. Now we have case law. Gender-based violence in South Africa is rife, and therefore we must use the legislation available to us to fight human trafficking and gender-based violence as well.
Central to the state's case was Laurentia Lombard, a former accused turned key witness. Her testimony implicated Joshlin's own mother as the mastermind, but Lombard's fate remains undecided.
I also have to deal with the indemnity of Ms. Lombard. I have decided not to deal with that application or my determination of it now. There will clearly be clear from what I've said so far that there will be another stage in this case. And one doesn't know what more evidence might be presented at that stage that might influence that decision. Furthermore, in the event that I have doubt on that question after all the evidence in the case has been laid, I might consider wanting to grant Ms. Lombard's legal representative to address me on the issue before final determination is made. But the primary reason is that I foresee a possibility that evidence might still be made in the next phase of this case that might impact that decision.
As the search for Joshlin enters its 16th month, police vow not to rest.
But what we're also going to be doing now, we're going to go back to the entire evidence that was presented and look if we can't find anything that could take us a lead to somewhere with the whole thing that the judge has said, also the testimony of each and every witness that testified there. We're going to have another lot of work to do, but there's a pain that we must go through to find Joshlin. We are working with all. That has not been closed until we found Joshlin. You may recall at one point we cast our net worldwide. We even went as far as stopping a vessel that was from here in the Great Britain, where we searched for 3 days, but we could not find anything. Our net is worldwide, and we are cooperating with other law enforcement measures in the entire world through Interpol.
A guilty verdict, a legal milestone, but 15 months later, still no child. The disappearance of Joshlin brought the peaceful town of Saldanha and the nation to a standstill. The community say that while the court may have spoken, the silence left by her absence continues to echo.
It's very overwhelming at this point in time, but I mean, I think we got what we wanted, and that was the guilty part. That's one part through now. Now we're just waiting for the sentence. That's why I'm saying a lot of emotions right now, because despite the guilty that they were found, we still don't have Joshlin, and it's like taking a bitter pill right now. So we're walking away here empty, still with no answers.
Justice has been done, and there is more to come. The only sad thing is that we still don't know where Joshlin is.
Justice is up, but where's the child, man? Say, where's Joshlin? We want Joshlin, man. Just give us Joshlin. Give us Joshlin.
I feel happy about the outcome, but we're just waiting for the sentencing. That's all we're going to do now. And it's very sad. If they can find us where Joshlin is, where the child is, I'll be very happy.
We're very glad. We're very glad for Joshlin. We're glad she's guilty.
I think everyone's just happy that justice has prevailed. Like, although it's been postponed again, but we know what's going to happen. And all we want to know now is Kelly actually going to say where Joshlin is?
But I'm sad. It's a sad day because, yes, it's the end of the legal process, but Joshlin remains missing. We remain with a system that is broken, a system that has failed Joshlin, a system that if we look at today, it's about systems. It's the construct of our systems. That's why. And Joshlin is one of many cases. You know, it's the vulnerable child that is not protected by our system.
We now take a closer look at the 8-week-long trial, the state's key evidence, the witness testimonies, and the damning findings that led to the convictions. Here's how the state built its case, revealing a sinister truth and painting a darker picture of events leading up to the child's mysterious disappearance. The court heard that Kelly confided to a man from her hometown, the Northern Cape, that she intended to sell her children for 20,000 rand.
As hulle hierdie keer kom en hulle het nie die volle bedrag van 20,000 rand, gaan sy tevrede wees met 5,000 rand. Sy sê verder, volgende jaar Januarie of Februarie, jy gaan met jou eie oë sien wat in Middelpos en dies wil gaan gebeur. Dit gaan lyk soos 'n movie scene van karre, voetgangers en mense wat soek. Maar hulle sal niks vind nie, omdat ek die kind ver weg sal laat vat.
Enters Laurentia Lombard in the dock. Once a close friend and co-accused, Lombard turned state witness and described Kelly as the mastermind behind the sale of her daughter. She provided chilling details about the plan and the role players involved. Lombard stated that Kelly confided in her shortly after finalizing the deal and that the little girl was sold for 20,000 rand to a sangoma for her eyes and skin, just one day before she went missing.
Kelly het vir my gesê, Rens, ek het nou 'n ding aangevang, verkoop aan 'n sangoma. Hoekom doen sy dit? Jong Rens, ek het geld nodig gehad en ek kry swaar. Boeta, hier is die geld wat die sangoma gegee het. Hoeveel geld is dit? En Kelly sê aan Boeta dis 20,000 rand.
On Monday, 19th of February 2024, The plan was in full swing around 7 o'clock that morning before Kelly left for work.
Ik kom daar bij Kelly se huis. Rikwan, Joshlin, Kelly, Buddha, Stefano was daar geweest bij de huis die ochtend. En voor Kelly weer toe gaan, noem Kelly aan Buddha. Buddha, 2 o'clock moet jy vir Joshlin hou, want die mense kom 2 o'clock vir Joshlin kom haal. Soos 'n broek en 'n skipe, 'n sweater en 'n panty. En ek sien my eie oë, sy pak dit in 'n koolebek, 'n swart koolebek in. En voor sy loop, sê sy vir Buddha, moenie vergeet nie asseblief. 2 o'clock, ek gaan kom en vir Joshlin kom haal. Ons vir Joshlin by die huis hou.
The long-awaited 2 o'clock arrived. Lombard says she stood at a distance behind rocks. Kelly, with a black cooler bag at hand, together with Joshlin, were met by the same woman in a white polo vehicle from Sunday afternoon.
En die vrou klim uit, maar dit was weer groen geweest. Dit was 'n groen doekje op haar kop geweest. Dit was die spikkels op haar kop geweest. En dit was die bandjie wat op haar kop geweest het. En die dress was geweest blik na shirts na kerk blouse geweest, maar dit is groen. En Kelly en die vrou maak die vrou die deur oop en Kelly en Joshlin klim in die kar in. Sy vat die koolebek saam. En die vrou klim weer voor in die kar. En verder aan, daar ry die kar. Ek en Stefano en Buddha moet vir niemand sê nie of vir die polisie dat 'n kind vermis is.
Coetzee and Lombard were the smoking gun the state used to build a solid case against Jacqueline Apollos, Stefano van Rijn, and Kelly Smith. The state maintained throughout that Joshlin's disappearance was no accident, but the result of a calculated plan to traffic the little girl for exploitation.
The plan was pre-planned already by Kelly the previous year, but the actual plan, came into being between these 4 role players. Jacqueline Apollos, Stefano van Rijn, Raquel Smith, and Laurentia Lombard, aka Rens. Initially, the plan was revealed to Stephen Coetzee, the most important corroboration evidence for Rens's testimony, which was in August of 2023 already, when the plan was already at that stage indicated to Mr. Coetzee. And once the court makes those inferences, I submit respectfully that a conviction should then follow in line with those inferences. So that is why the state prays for a conviction of all 3 the accused on the main count of trafficking in persons, and then on the kidnapping count as explained.
In the closing of the state's case, Senior Prosecutor Advocate Zelda Swanepoel tied the evidence together through what she described as a golden thread.
And this is the first one of its kind, and I say that because usually in a tip case, and I will refer to trafficking in persons further as a tip case, usually in a tip case, the main source of information and your most important source of information usually is your victim. In this case, we don't have a victim because our victim, little Joshlin, is still missing. That Joshlin was indeed sold, and that it was for the purpose of exploitation, the exploitation being in the form of slavery or practices similar to slavery. Thirdly, that there was indeed an agreement reached between the 3 accused and Ms. Lombard, that the agreement entailed that Joshlin will be sold and that they will keep quiet and tell no one anything about it, including the police, that there was a common purpose between them. There had been an agreement. And then fourthly, that all 3 the accused knew, or ought reasonably to have known, that Joshlin was in fact being sold for the purpose of exploitation. And lastly, that all 3 the accused and Ms. Lombard stood to benefit financially. You cannot only look at the evidence of Laurentia Lombard in isolation. My respectful submission is yes, I concede there is criticism against what she testified, and the court will carefully evaluate that. But, my lord, it's the state's submission that there is that golden thread of truth running through her testimony, even if there are reliable aspects in her testimony. The golden thread is still there, my lord, and I submit with respect that there's other evidence that corroborates her version.
With the state case closed, the defense was up next. But before they did, they had a final attempt of filing a Section 174 application, a bid for the charges to be dropped against Smith and Van Ryn.
The defense will argue that accused number 2 has no case to answer. All the state witnesses that have testified in this case didn't bring any evidence that this court can come to a conclusion that accused number 2 has committed an offense.
What about the evidence of Ms. Lombard?
The evidence of Ms. Lombard, my lord, it was not credible.
Smith's defense echoed that sentiment.
The state has failed to prove a prima facie case against accused number 3 in this matter. But the state had relied on various and numerous witnesses in an attempt to prove its case. However, with regard to the offense of human trafficking, there was only one witness, Laurentia Lombard, who could testify in that regard. My lord, with regard to her evidence, I submit that it was of such a poor quality that it should be rejected in its entirety by this court. On her own evidence, she testified that her confession, which she had made, it was full of incorrect information or mistakes because she was under the influence. And on her own, she told this court that Sunday before Joshlin went missing, she smoked drugs. That Monday, she also consumed drugs. So for that reason alone, again, her evidence is unreliable.
But that application was denied. Minutes after the dismissal of the discharge application, the defense case took an interesting turn.
The defense, on behalf of accused 1, Mr. Pollis, elects that Mr. Pollis will make use of his right to remain silent in terms of the Constitution.
Mr. Van Ryn chooses to exercise his constitutional rights, not to testify.
No, we'll be calling any witnesses. We're therefore closing the case for accused number 3.
Katrina Lambert forms part of a group of residents beginning the day with prayer, their faith unwavering despite the pain.
Soos is almal hoopvol en dis ons die rede van ons gebed soggendsessie en dat die Here moet regtig vir ons help en dat Joshlin na vore sal kom. Ons het gebid vir Jassie Rasmus dat die Here vir hom help en dat die Here vir hom wysheid gee. Sê vir nou het voor my groot geword. Ons bly, ons is bure, ons bly in een pad. Hy het groot geword as 'n normale seentjie by sy ma en sy pa en Boeta het groot geword in die kerk, het Boeta groot geword. Hy het daar geslaap ook as ons dienste gehad het. Hy het so groot geword en hy het 'n tiener geword. Ons weet nie wat het in hulle lewens oor, wat het gebeur in hulle lewens nie. Dit gaan nie stop nie. Want nadat die hof sy uitslag gaan gee, ons vertroue hoe ook al, wat ek kan toe ook al, hierdie saak gaan uitdraai.
Now, the convicted trio for human trafficking and kidnapping of Joshlin will return to the Western Cape High Court, sitting in Cape Town on the 9th of May.
All that will happen there is I will be informed how we're going to do the process further. And it will depend on availability of witnesses, reports, and so on. And once I have that, and we determine a date, we postpone the matter back here for a day or two. It won't take longer than 3 days, I think, to come and finalize the matter, where I will then have to impose sentence. I want you to give your legal representatives instructions as to what you want to do. Because remember, there is a prescribed sentence of life imprisonment on count one.
Hours after judgment in the Western Cape High Court on Friday, Kelly Smith's home was razed to the ground. Police say a 27-year-old woman was arrested after handing herself over. She is due to appear in court soon on a charge of arson. That concludes the Joshlin Smith trial. Thank you for watching.